ஏதன் கண்ணே நிலையாகி இருந்திடும் உலகமெல்லாம் எதனெல்லாம் எதனின்று அனைத்துலகும் எழும்போ மற்றவையாவும் எதன் பொருட்டாம் எதனாலு வையமெல்லாம் எழுந்திடும் எல்லாமும் எதுவே ஆகும் அதுதானே உளபொருளாம் சத்தியமாம் அச்சொருபம் அகத்தில் வைப்பாம் போலி மன எழுச்சி மகள் உற்றோனாகி போலி மன பதைப்பு வெறுப்புற்றோனாகி போலி முயல் வாம் தொடக்கம் புற்றோனாகி புறையிலனாய் உலகில் விளையாடு வீரா மாலெனும் பல் கட்டு விடு பட்டோனாகி மண்ணு சமனாகி எல்லா நிலைமை கண்ணும் வேலைகள் வேடத்தியவ வெளியில் செய்து வேண்டியவார் உலகில் விளையாடு வீரா With Bhagavan's immense grace, we are coming to the last verse in the Upasana Prakaranam or the Sadhana Prakaranam. Bhagavan has selected two verses, 26 and 27, from Yoga Vasishtam, which are to be seen together with the verse numbers 22 and 23. 22 and 23 of Yoga Vasishtam mentioned above, as well as the 24th verse selected as the final verse from the segment in Yoga Vasishtam, and 25th verse selected from Devi Kalotram. The idea is that one has to see them together. If seen independently, the verses 24, 26 and 27, if seen independently, they will appear as though they are suggesting a separate path. Whereas when we see together with the earlier verses, then the indication is a little bit different. We will go into that. The idea is that in Yoga Vasishtam itself, when we look at these verses, if you keep the chapter number and verse number, all these verses are in a continuation of dialogue between Sri Rama and Vasishta Muni. So the verses we are seeing now, the verse 26 and 27, come towards the fag end of the dialogue. However, they are all strung together from the earlier verses. So the idea behind my emphasizing this is that the earlier verses have the sadhana of self-inquiry alone and the other sadhanas as add-on, whereas these two verses allow the possibility of having self-inquiry and the other sadhana go hand in hand. So my suggestion is that If one can hold the self-inquiry alone, then that will see that everything is brought by self-inquiry. But even otherwise, if one feels that one is doing two different sadhanas, that is also all right. That they will also bring us to the self-inquiry alone and the self alone. So we come to this last verse because it's almost a revisitation of the previous verse in content. What we do is we go into the principles behind these two verses having a legitimate place in sadhana, and then finally we finish by looking at the actual content of verse 27 itself. So this verse we go in again. Polimana எழுச்சி மகள் உற்றோனாகி போலிமன பதைப்பு வெறுப்புற்றோனாகி போலிமுயல் வாந்தொடக்கம் உற்றோனாகி புறையிலனாய் உலகில் விளையாடுவீரா. That is the first segment. Seeming, the way the great ones have translated this is seeming to have happiness or pleasure and the aversion or fear engage in the world. That is the seemingly having is the word they have used. We can also directly see that Bhagavan is saying clearly having vision of the rise of the false mind, which causes the pleasure and pain or pleasure and fear. Polimana padaipu verupputronahi. So the excitement or anxiety and the aversion apparently seems to be there. That is how you have to function. As though they are there. Polimana எழுச்சி மகள் உற்றோனாகி. With clear detachment towards the rise of the mind and happiness in the events, as well as the false rise of excitement or eagerness to do something, and also aversion at something that should be not happening at all. Polimuyal vaantodakka mutronahi. Akka used to say that one of the namas in Bhagavan Sahasranama is that Sarvarambha Parityagi. The Atma, Bhagavan Ramana, is Sarvarambha Parityagi. He does not begin anything at all, because everything is finished or nothing rises in him, whichever way we look at it. But in this verse, there is this possibility of having that in place, but knowing that it is a mirage, that it does not have any real content. It is polimana. Polimana, polimuyal vam todakkam. With an effort, as though you are beginning something. Todakkam utronahi. Purai vilanai ulahil vilayadu veera. Purai means without any of these faults actually being there. That is, even while engaging in these apparent activities, which is obviously evident to the onlooker, that the onlooker always feels this person is engaging with intent, is engaging with desire for completion, desire to communicate something. But the sadhaka himself, according to Vasishtha Muni, how he should understand this is that, as said in the earlier verse, with the focus on the jnana drishti, without leaving the jnana drishti. That was what was mentioned in verse number 26 of Ulladu Narpadu Anubandham. Without leaving the jnana drishti in the outside world, as though the false mind is rising, the false mind is engaging in happiness, in sorrow, in excitement, in aversion, in beginnings, in completions. As though you are interested in them, you engage. But in reality, you should not have any of those faults. So the first two lines, as in the verse number 26, they cover the sadhana avastha. How to do the sadhana of Atma Vicharam, hold the Atma Vicharam, and play in the world as though you are having those, or engage in the world with detachment, with no attachment to the happenings. What happens? The Siddhate is mentioned in the next two verses. If one persists in that sadhana, as in the verse number 26, how it was suggested that the jnana drishti should not be left, but one should engage in detached role play. The same is the import of this verse. Only details of the role play are given instead of the overall mention of role play. What is involved in the role play? Involved in the role play are the pleasures, the pains, the fears, the falls, the engagements, as though there is completion. All these are involved, but one should be without any of those faults. In actuality, when one practices that with effort, holding the self and detachment to the world, what actually transpires by the pre-existing self is that Malanum pal kattuvidu patto nahi. When we practice like that with effort, then by the grace of the self, one gets rid of all the attachments which arise out of impurity, which arise out of malenum, impurity, pal kattu. The attachment doesn't rise in one direction. There are many attachments that rise simultaneously. Pal kattu vidupatto nahi. So when one continues the sadhana of holding the self and playing in the world with detachment, of course both involving effort, then there comes this point where one is free of all the attachments. Malenum pal kattu vidupatto nahi, mannu samanahi ella nilaimai kannum. The equanimity of Parama Yoga, the equanimity of Mahayoga, having been established in all the states, the waking, the dream, the deep sleep, the illness, the good health, the bad health, all these states that one can think of, there is an equanimity which arises out of natural detachment, natural self-attention. So, the second part of the verse says what actually happens when one practices like that. Malenu pal kattu vidupatto nahi. One is freed of all these impurities rising as attachments. Mannu samanahi ella nilaimai kannum. There is an equanimity that is the highest point of yoga. The samatvam, yoga muchyate, which is the Paramatma sthiti, the highest state in Yoga Marga, that is what is attained. In the Yoga Vasishtam verse, which is taken as verse number 27 here, Vasishta Muni guarantees that the Mahayoga sthiti, where one is effortlessly abiding in the self and effortlessly playing the role, that both mean the complete detachment and complete abidance in the self. Manna samanahi, the equanimity which is the highest point of yoga, is naturally attained when the self is held and the detachment is the role play. Detachment in the role play is what is followed. Naturally, one comes to samatvam, yoga muchyate. The third vakya selected by Bhagavan from Bhagavad Gita to say that all these mention the same truth. Samatvam yoga muchyate, karma, the skill in action is the yoga kausalam. That is yogam karmasu kausalam. Yogam karmasu kausalam. The skill in action is yoga. Samatvam yoga muchyate, mamekam sharanam vraja, and Ekameva Dvitiyam. These are the four phrases selected from Bhagavad Gita by Bhagavan to show the highest point of each of those marga. Karma marga, yogam karmasu kausalam. Yoga marga, samatvam yogam uchyate. And bhakti marga, mamekam sharanam vraja. And in the jnana marga, ekameva dvitiyam. These are the four highest statements Bhagavan selects from. So this verse brings us to that equanimity. That is, samatvam yoga muchyate. The Mahayoga Sthiti is brought about by the simultaneous practice of attending to the self and playing the role detachedly. We will see later how both these streams and come and join in that yoga. Malenum pal kattu vidu patto nahi, man samanahi ella nilamai kannum, வேலைகள் வேடத்தியை வை வெளியில் செய்து வேடத்தியை வை. What is the natural requirement of the role you play? According to that role, do whatever has to be done. Whatever has to be done, do accordingly, because there is going to be only the detached attention there. வெளியில் செய்து வேண்டியவர் உலகில் விளையாடுகிறார். Vasishtha gives the highest freedom to the jnani, that you can now play in the world as you want. Of course, Sadhuvam Swamigal translates that with great care. To still say, he doesn't translate it as, though in the translation of word by word, he translates it as you want, as you desire. But when translating it in the phraseology, he takes great care to show that it does not mean you can do whatever you want. It is only indicating the freedom of consciousness of such a jnani, not freedom in doing whatever you want in the bound area. Now, that's not what is indicated. So, Sadhuvam Swamigal is very careful. If you read his book, you can see that in translating the word by word meaning, he has translated that Vendiyavar as you desire. But while doing the phrase translation, the translation of the meaning of the verse, he is very careful to say that one is to do the work according to the role play. That's all he says. It doesn't say you can do whatever you want. But we can go into that part also a little bit if time permits. So we just do a bringing together of the meaning. The first two sentences of this verse indicate that one has to do the sadhana. One can do the sadhana as a combination of the paying attention to the self, holding the attention to the self, and playing the role detachedly. We can always recollect that detachment is the Jnana Marga word for surrender. Detachment is conscious surrender. If you want, you can put it like that. And they are both the same. Therefore, this is the point where Bhagavan is teaching that Atma Ucharam can go hand in surrender. Comes that these are the two verses which say that whatever we are actually practicing now, we do the Thursday satsang of Atma Ucharam, and we in all reverence, we offer the Ashtotra Puja to Bhagavan. They can go, the surrender and Atma Ucharam can definitely go hand in hand. The Shakti of the Ishvara comes to our protection, which is far greater than any jiva can ever aspire to be, comes to our support in surrender as we practice Atma Ucharam. Without mentioning in so many words, the same word surrender is used as detachment in Jnana Marga. If we understand the nuance, then we can freely practice surrender and Atma Ucharam hand in hand. We sum up the verse that the first two sentences mean that the sadhaka with effort should pay attention to the self and play the role that he has taken up or that has been given to him, depending on your perspective. He has to play the role with detachment. When he plays like that, the third and fourth sentences assure the assurance of the Rishi, of the sage Vasishtha, is that Malenum pal kattu vidupattona. Automatically, all the bonds arising out of the impurity of ignorance, they just vanish. Kattu vidupattona mannu samanahi ella nilaygal kannum. In all the states of existence, the waking, the dream, the deep sleep, there is an equanimity. There is a stillness or calmness of consciousness, undisturbed. Mandu samanahi ella nilaimai kannum வேலைகள் வேட இயைவை இயைவ வெளியில் செய்து. As according to the role you have taken up, taking up the works, there is a natural detachment in the playing of those roles. வேண்டியவர் உலகில் விளையாடு. வேண்டியவர் means with a completely free awareness, not வேண்டியவர் in the actions, but the complete freedom of the consciousness, which is totally detached in role play and effortlessly touching this Purana. That is what is emphasized in Vendiyavar. Because after all, what the Jnani does desire, he desires only being in the Jnanam. He does not desire whether the speech comes out properly or not, or it may happen so in the detached, this one. But really, there is no desire to see it happen in one way or the other. So that is the summing up of the verse itself, verse number 27. These two verses, verse number 26 and 27, they give us scope. But we saw in the earlier discussion, any scope comes along with it, along in its wake, bringing a limitation also. So one should be aware of the limitation, and one should always be looking to what Bhagavan is actually pointing out, that the detachment towards work will culminate in a natural self-attention, will culminate in a natural self-abidance. It is not that self-abidance will make you wash the pots better than others. That may happen, that the gathering of the pots that you have assembled may look better than others, but that is not the purpose of abiding in the self. Abiding in the self is for abiding in the self itself, not for anything else. So with that clarity having been looked in again, let us go into the discussion of the verse. As I said, the intent of the discussion during the week has been not to expand on the actual contents of the verse, but the principles behind how Bhagavan is able to give us this benefit of sadhana, that you can play your role detachedly as well as paying attention to the self and still come to self-realization. So we go into those details to the extent possible. You can always refer back to the discussions during the week and come up with any clarifications or suggestions or doubts. The first part obviously is how can Bhagavan open up like this? That is, how does Bhagavan open up the sadhana of the non-self? When the main sadhana in who am I is only holding the self, how does he mention something about the non-self area? What is the clue he gives regarding the opening up of this path? He gives us the clue in talk number 391 by saying that one of the ways of looking at a jnani who is abiding in the self from the onlooker's perspective is that even a jnani seems to have desires, fulfillment, aversion, like when Bhagavan shouts at those people who have carelessly hit the mango tree in such a way that to drop the fruits, they have made so many leaves fall down. And when Bhagavan sees all those leaves lying on the ground, they say that the whole hill reverberated with his garjane. The identification with the pain of the tree says that is a mother tree who has given us the fruits and each leaf is life clinging on, and when you pluck, there is pain for the tree, and you have been so careless in hitting them and bringing so many leaves to the ground. Couldn't you have put a hook and taken the fruits that you wanted and gotten away with it? The garjane that Bhagavan does, I have heard it from the lips of very young children who used to narrate that story, and it used to be so touching. Now, when somebody looks at that, then they feel that Bhagavan did have that anger against them, didn't he? We will come to that it was not really so. But for the moment, from that perspective, to open up the field for the sake of our sadhana, if we say the jnani too has that anger in the moment he is angry. Of course, in many episodes of that indication also, Bhagavan would have taken somebody to task left, right and center for the approach they have had in questioning. That very rarely happens. And two of his devotees would have come with their books for some doubt. And they will be forced to sit through this bombardment from Bhagavan. He will be taking that person to task, tearing him down with such force. Obviously, there must have been some value in that person that these people are left stunned. And when that interaction is over and Bhagavan has ended that, they get up to go. And Bhagavan immediately changes. Says, you came for asking some doubt, isn't it? No, ask that. That means, from that perspective too, the extraordinary anger, which would have left a normal sadhaka disturbed for years together, probably janmas together, is momentarily left by the jnani. In that moment that it was ended, that's it. The next work starts and he is available there totally. He says, why are you getting up and going? Ask that and attends to them. So in that perspective, in the jnani, there is this acting totally with whatever the equipments are required in that moment. So when the description of jnani's action is done like that, the description is samskaras are said to persist even in jnanis. The description has to be like that the vasanas seem to persist even in jnanis. So how do you take it further? Because unless it is said that the jnani performs the actions detachedly, so detachedly that there is complete engagement and complete disengagement, we can't open up that path. We cannot open up that path for sadhana. If you describe the jnani's existence as only abiding in the self, these two verses have no place. But Bhagavan comes to our aid, and in talk 391, you can go through it at leisure. He says that in one of the ways of describing the jnani, for the sake of sadhana of the people who are approaching the self, we can say that the jnani too seems to have samskaras. But what are the samskaras of nature? It is bodha hetu samskara, not bandha hetu samskara. As I said, that these samskaras are present in that moment. But unlike in the sadhaka, which we discuss in one of the incidents, that Anubandham Swami, who was the supervisor, he writes in his account of his relationship with Bhagavan, he writes that in one of the places, they were to put up a small rectangular slab of granite. Exactly it had to be measured and cut in that particular dimension. And Bhagavan sees the rock, sees the granite or the stone and tells, these are the grains along with which the person should cut it. So Anubandham Swami is instructing. If they cut in any other way, the rock would be damaged and it cannot be used. So Anubandham Swami takes it all in and he goes and describes it exactly as Bhagavan told to the person who is doing the job. Unfortunately, when he comes and sees, because he goes and attends to other supervisory works, comes back and sees the rock is damaged. And if I remember right, he gives a slap to the man, because Bhagavan's order has been for whatever reason. Now, that event is there in him throughout the day. And every day, for his great good fortune, he would come and sign off with Bhagavan about what happened in the day. And while narrating the day, this residue is there. He says, I did one wrong thing, Bhagavan. I am feeling bad about it. That I hit this man because he did not obey the requirement there. And Bhagavan says, that happened then. That happened, that moment is over in that moment. Now, why do you want to bring it back? Why are you still affected by it? Inquire who am I and get rid of this affectation of the past, the continuation of the karma, the continuation of the moment into extended time. And Bhagavan makes him make that moment indirectly revealing this path, how the jnani functions spontaneously in the present moment, completely present for whatever is the role play required, but then completely off when that requirement is gone. And the moment means that event. That event itself is one moment, and the end of the moment one is free. Now, this bandha hetu and bhoga hetu vasanas are described further in one of the other talks which I have mentioned in the. So I'll go into the actual description. In bhoga hetu, the word used in talks is enjoyment. That is, the bhoga hetu vasanas of the jnani are therefore only enjoyment. This enjoyment should not be mistaken for the current connotation of enjoying a pleasure. Enjoyment should be taken as experiencing. It could be a pain, it could be a pleasure, and if we look deeply into it, whenever the jnani comes into engagement, it should be only pain. It is pain taken up, as Humphrey says, as an act of self-sacrifice for the others. So whenever the jnani comes into action, it is an act of self-sacrifice for the sake of others. Because where is the happiness for the jnani? Only in the self. Any other thing is only sorrow, there is nothing else. Therefore, there is a deliberate engagement in that only for the sake of others. Says Bhagavan in many places that the jnani comes into action, an act of deliberate disequilibrium, knowing fully well equilibrium is his nature, but that cost is paid for the sake of others, says Bhagavan. Of course, the moment you remove that into the self alone is, this others is also not there. That the facility of saying, I have done it for others, that is also vanished. That also vanishes in the self-abidance, but that's another story. Now, coming back to the focus of how Bhagavan opens this up, the bhoga hetu vasanas are those which are present in the moment, have to be suffered in that moment, and totally ended with detachment, and one goes. So that is what allows Vasishtha Muni to describe the sadhana in this way, that one can practice Atma Vicharam side by side with detachment towards the role play, or when we bring in Bhagavan's words, with surrender to Bhagavan, combined to go hand in hand with Atma Vicharam. How the surrender to Bhagavan is there? Because the Ishvara is posited. The Ishvara is taking care of all the actions. Therefore, one can use surrender to let go, to be detached to the role play, and practice Atma Vicharam for self-abidance. So, naturally, there is an indirect reliance in the Jnana Marga on Ishvara Shakti, wherever detachment is mentioned, and where there is a direct reliance on Ishvara in the surrender, and an indirect emphasis of detachment in the Bhakti Marga, where surrender is used. So both are similar. The connection is that in the Jnana Marga, where detachment is allowed for the Jiva, how can the Jiva be detached in role play unless some other power is taking care of the whole structure? So the detachment allowed in Jnana Marga has Ishvara Shakti as an underlying current, indirectly taken for granted, and in surrender, where the Ishvara Shakti is directly relied on to go to the Atma of the Ishvara. in doing self-inquiry with Arunachala Stuti Panchakam, what we do, we seek the Mayaham of Arunachala. the true self. There are at least 3-4 verses in Aksharamanamalai where Bhagavan says that the Mayaham of Arunachala is the final resting place for the consciousness of the seeker. Meyyaham Nadayan Tattadinde Arul Arunachala Meyyahatin Manamenmalaranayilna Meikalangida Arul Arunachala. These are some verses where Bhagavan uses the terms the true self of Arunachala. The Ishvara self is the true self. So we see that detachment and surrender are one and the same thing, and detachment naturally requires the positing of Ishvara Shakti indirectly, and surrender naturally means the role play detachment. So these are mentioned so that there can be a clarity in sadhana, a clarity in the engagement with the Atma, and disengaged, detached role play in the world. So how is this actually possible? Is that because Bhagavan gives the true description that the self alone is. In the self alone is, the Atma has consumed the Tripurti, of world, Jiva, and Ishvara. All the three are now consumed by the Aham Aham. The Aham Aham of Bhagavan in self alone is the standalone Aham Aham, which is Niralamba Atma. It alone is. To open up the sadhana for the joining of surrender with Atma Vicharam or detachment with Atma Vicharam, the same Aham Aham becomes the connecting thread of all the parts of all the worlds. You call them Jiva, you call them as particles, but the world is made of many particles. All those beads are connected by Aham Aham. The beads may have differences, but the Aham Aham is without break, is continuous. In the beads, there can be separation from one bead to another. There is a separation between waking state, dream state, and deep sleep state. But all the three are three beads connected by Aham Aham, by the real self. Now that is in the real sense, that is the principle. The Aham Aham being the thread which connects the beads of existence, that allows the detachment in role play and Atma Vicharam. One can detachedly play the role because Aham Aham is the connecting bead. It is doing the work. That means what? Bhagavan clarifies in another talk that what this means is that those who are relying on the Aham Aham as bead, as the string connecting the beads, they are working towards non-doership. That is, they are understanding that each of them is not the real doer. They are all relying on the train carrying them. They are merely passengers. So what happens in detachment is that there is non-doership. Now, to come to some very practical example, there are some few other people working towards this string and bead. That is, everything is connected. In practical science, there are many scientists who work on this, and they find they are not able to prove it completely. A plus b whole square like that, they are not able to prove. But it is so clear to them that everything is connected. And we have already seen while discussing Ulladu Narpadu the contributions of Tom Chi, Carl Sagan, and Stephen Hawking, and a few of the others, Feynman and others, who find everything is connected. Now, they come up to some point and then they are not able to take it further to the standalone self. That is where Bhagavan's teachings gives Purnatva. That is, he doesn't stop with the Arunachala is the thread connecting Manigalil Saradana Uyurdurum Nana Madantaru Uruvanai Maruvinai Nida. He doesn't stop there. That, oh Arunachala, you are the thread who runs and connects between all the jivas and all the religions and all the branches of thoughts. From there, Bhagavan moves on to say, the Mayaham alone is. Who is Arunachala? Arunachala is the Atma Swarupa, is the I, the existence consciousness. Irundolil, Unaividu, Tadutidal Devam, Irutinai Vilakidu, Tadutidale Khan. Who is Arunachala? Arunachala is the existence consciousness, I. So Arunachala is not that thread alone which connects. He is also the bead. He is also the ability to connect. He is the Purna self which alone is. It consumes the thread, it consumes the beads, it consumes the act of connection. The self alone is. So we find that when one combines self-inquiry with detachment to work or to surrender to Bhagavan, Bhagavan will not just keep us as surrendered beings. He will take us to the self and make us merge in the self, because that is the Swaswarupa. That is the Swaswarupa of every being. Therefore, Swaswarupa of Bhagavan also. Therefore, Bhagavan will not stop. The surrender to Bhagavan will help us come to self-abidance. This, now taking up detachment, we can see it, how it works. Detachment in role play frees the consciousness, putting the onus on the connecting thread, putting the onus on the Ishvara Shakti. Ishvara Shakti is there, which allows me to play the role freely and detachedly. If it requires shouting in the moment, it happens, but it begins and ends. You'll be surprised to know that some such thing happened. Venkateshji and I, we have been traveling to Tiruvannamalai many times over so many years. So the last time, maybe it was 2 years back, Venkateshji, I and Murali, we were traveling to Tiruvannamalai, and in near after Hosur, there was this bike person. There was a something, the barricade that was blocking his vision, and we were driving in the main road, and he suddenly entered to cross over to the other segment. I don't remember whether he stopped or he crossed over, but in the nick of the moment, the accident was averted, and all the three of us shouted something, whatever was the exclamation that was there. But in Bhagavan's grace, we could also see that the next moment, all three of us were back to normal. That Bhagavan's grace, the sadhana in Bhagavan, had allowed what he is saying here, that in the moment, the Bhogahetu is there, that which has to be experienced is there, but it ends with a sharp cut. It doesn't have a touch with who we are. It happens, it is there in the moment, it ends. Now, that is what allows this sadhana of detached role play and self-inquiry happening hand in hand. But where does it end? One should not forget that there is no the reference to objects, role play or detachment in the self. In the self alone is, what happens is that to the jnani, to the one who is resting in the self, the rise and fall has not happened. The identity is with the silence. There is no requirement to say this happened in the moment and ended in the moment. That is why Bhagavan says the jnani is like a child to whom milk has been fed, waking up him in the night, that in the next morning when he is asked, oh, how was the milk which I gave you? When the mother asks him, did you enjoy the sugar and the elaki I had put? What elaki, what sugar? I didn't have milk. Will the response of the child be? Like that, the jnani is towards actions. Like for the sake of Annamalai Swami, he is bringing it. What is happening to the present moment? Why are you bringing a morning's emotion, a reaction to this moment? Why are you giving continuity to that? That is how karma is continued. The Sukshma karma becomes Sthula karma. Yeah, reincarnation after reincarnation happens when reactions are continued and carried in the mind. Why are you not living in the present moment? In the present moment, do you need a thought about that? Let it go. Bhagavan brings that for the sake of Annamalai Swami. But where does Bhagavan live? Does Bhagavan say, I corrected Annamalai Swami? No. When Yogi Ramaya says, Bhagavan, do you not instruct others? Do you not instruct me? Do you not wake up people in the Brahma Muhurtam? People are sleeping around you, and you feel Brahma Muhurtam is the time when nature is cooperating with the Brahman. And when two great powers are cooperating, is that not the time for the sadhaka to make best use of that? So the jnani says, you wake up, and that is a voluntary. It seems that you are not even asked by them. There is this popular method of saying Bhagavan only responds when somebody is asking him. That rule is also broken. Not only in this instance, there are other instances that Bhagavan suo moto comes in. Now, how do you explain that? There is no explanation. The explanation is that the jnani does not need any explanation. There can be no explanation on which he can rely on. That is why Bhagavan says, when somebody from the Gandhiji's mutt comes and asks Bhagavan, many are the false gurus these days who do all the things that they want in the world, enjoy this, that and that too, and then say that is all according to prarabdha. That was all enjoyed spontaneously in the moment. In that moment it was there, next moment it is not there. And Bhagavan says, no jnani can resort to that. No jnani can claim that this was in the prarabdha and it was lived in the moment. That is all. No, that reliance is not there for the jnani. It is only for the sadhana of the newcomer that it can be suggested. Hold on to this. But jnani cannot claim the benefit of prarabdha because jnani's resort is only the self. He is only the thought-free state. He cannot come and say, I had that momentary burst, therefore that enjoyment is allowed. Absolutely not, says Bhagavan. Even that enjoyment which the householder is prevented, you stop at the signal, he said. Does that mean the jnani can Vendiyavaru ulagil vilayadu means that means you can break the signal and go? No. Bhagavan would be the highest care giver to the rules of the ashram. He would never break any of the rules. Of course, where it comes to darshan and where it comes to upadesham, there would be no limits to Bhagavan's karuna. But where the actions are concerned, where the ashram has to come together and work cogently, Bhagavan would obey all the rules like any other. In fact, better than all others. Now, the emphasis on that is that the Vendiyavar ulagil vilayadu veera does not mean that you can enjoy anything in the world and say that was the prarabdha, therefore in the spontaneous action of the moment that took place. No, that reliance is not there for the one who is on this side of the mic. For the people who are on this side of the mic, only self-abidance. When someone comes, his own disciple puts a case and the people from the court come for inquiry, Bhagavan patiently answers all the questions and not simple questions, very deliberate and deeply provoking questions to the mind of the onlooker. Then at the end of those 2 sessions, at least it is reported as 2 sessions in talks with Ramana Maharshi, might have been 1 session. But at the end of it, some devotee asked Bhagavan, this grueling questioning, are you not tired after this? Bhagavan says, what grueling questioning? Only if I use my mind, only if I have origin in my mind, do I need to feel tired. I am not having any mind, I am not responding out of mind. Where is the question of tiredness? Manasam tu kim margane krite. Naiva manasam. There is no mind. There is no object. The Atma alone is there. That alone is the resting point of the Jnana. He cannot take umbrage under this claim that this was spontaneously there and I was only in Bhogahetu Vasana. All that explanation is only for the sadhaka, and the sadhaka too should not take any umbrage on this and should not stop still self-abidance is reached and realized to be one's very nature. With Bhagavan's immense grace, who has brought us to this sadhana, there is no doubt that there can be no stopping at any other place. One has to simply be sincere. That's all. To the extent, as Akka would say, to the extent we can, to the extent that we can surrender to Him, play the role detachedly, and do Atmocharam. There is no other place that Bhagavan will allow us to go except in self-abidance. With Bhagavan's immense grace, let us sit in Atmocharam for 10 minutes. Revatima, you are there.
Yes, Uncle. I'll set the time.
Thank you. Namo Ramana.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana, shining as a self in all beings. With the immense grace of the self manifest as Ramana, we have been dwelling on Bhagavan's teaching and also been able to practice the self-enquiry. And self-enquiry is holistic, it is all-inclusive. Just as the self is all-inclusive, self-enquiry is also all-inclusive. It has all the aspects of, it has bhakti, it has detachment, it has, you can think of any sadhana, it is included in self-enquiry. But if we want to do, if our mind says we are doing that sadhana exclusive of self-enquiry, then finally self-enquiry will embrace us. It will show us that it was included in any case. By embracing us, Bhagavan will say, Adu kondu poi vidum. It will take you there. It will take you there. So here, very beautifully, the position of the jnani and the position of the sadhaka are both beautifully highlighted in this verse. We have seen in the life of Sri Rama, this literally this Asai pol ulahil vilayadu veera. Bhagavan has narrated one story of Parvati Devi asking Parameshwara, you say you are doing Ramanama Japa, you are all the time speaking of the glory of Rama. What is so glorious about Rama? There he is on the earth and he is weeping, he is crying. Sita, Sita, Janaki, Vaidehi, he is embracing a tree and asking, have you seen? He is looking at the deer and asking, have you seen Sita? He is weeping. Shiva says, no, no, you don't understand that it is Asai Vendiyavaru Ulahil Vilayadu Veera. But then it is said that Parvati was still not convinced and she took the form of Sita Devi and went and stood in front of Rama, who was apparently in that condition. And Sri Rama immediately folded his hands and asked her, Amma, why have you left Parameshwara alone and come? So there was no illusion. Aham manusham manyo, he himself says, I am a human being. In Bhagavan's life, we find that devotees would say, very rarely Bhagavan would allow that veil, that concept that he was just a human being with which he moved around in the world to drop. That veil to drop. Very rarely he would allow it to drop and show or express his original glory. That's why Muni says, Dvitrastvam Girijanka Pitanilayam. Only 2 or 3 know about your divinity, O Lord, he says. In that sense, that Bhagavan, to many might have looked, even to Osborne, when Osborne first came, Bhagavan looked to him like just a sweet old man. Here was a gripe sadhaka who had come, but Bhagavan didn't reveal his glory to him. Except at that right moment, he revealed that, through that look he revealed. So this play, the role play, of course, there is in this Vedam, I think there is Vedam Iyavai, Vedattu Iyavai, that word is there, according to the role, according to the Vesham, I think that is there in that verse. According to the Vesham you play, according to the role you have donned, you play Vendiyavaru. Has been translated as, Nandakumarji says, as per your desire, but it was just striking me. Vendiya means as what is, who, for whom the Vendiya? For Vendiya for the role, not Vendiya for the person. Because the role has already been mentioned as required by the role. You play. is because Bhagavan has also given the example of the actor on the stage, the cashier at the bank. He gives this example, live in the world like that, he says, because he says one day, one moment the actor will be the king. Then he will go in the next scene, he will be a vassal to another king. He will be carrying his footwear. There will be no sense of sorrow that I am carrying the footwear of the king. I was a king myself. Now I am reduced to the position of carrying the footwear of the king. On the other hand, if he is a good actor, he will be carrying the footwear with absolute joy in the fact, or expressing himself as a very good servant. So that would be what an actor would love to express himself as per the requirement of the role. And if the actor actually happens to enter into the role, the actor will feel sad that I have intruded into the role. I have intruded. So that could also be an interpretation, though it is not there in the translations of the great ones, that Vendiya but Nandakumarji has indicated it to us today. And Bhagavan also we see, Bhagavan, we had a drama where we depicted in Natya we have 9 rasas, 9 forms of expressions, 9 forms of Vendiyavari Vilayadu or play in the world. And those are the 9 emotions or the rasas we say. There is fear, there is anger, there is disgust, there is, of course, there is sorrow, and there is, all the 9 are there. Wonderment is there. And we said that we looked at it in 2 ways. We looked at Bhagavan's depiction of these emotions. And we find that Bhagavan has depicted these emotions, expressed these emotions at some point or the other. And we said he was struck with wonder when he read the Periya Puranam. He was filled with disgust for the Bain's English grammar when he left home. What is there in this? Again and again writing this. Because initially in the first interpretation, I thought Bhagavan did not have disgust for anything. Then Dr. A.S. Venugopal Rao said, no, a Jnani is totally complete. And then we realized because there is nothing that is rejected by a Jnani. Nothing is rejected. And everything finds its place in him because he is a Purna Purusha, Purna Purusha, Purushottama. So everything will find a place. But what happens in sadhana? Now, for the jnani, everything, it's a role, it's an absolute role, it's a perfect actor. Or Bhagavan sometimes gives the example of a transistor radio, which can express so many emotions, but there is no one sitting inside. He says there is no one sitting inside. All the emotions, we can hear many emotions, or in television we can see many scenes also. But who is sitting inside the television? Nobody is sitting. Even in the movie, we see the play of light and we see the actor. But there is no actor over there. So it is like that, says Bhagavan. But what about the sadhaka? What about the sadhana perspective? Yes, for the sadhaka also to see this as a drama, as a role play is very, very helpful because one recognizes many things when one sees this as a role play, because one would recognize that others are also playing roles. And then if everyone is playing a role, then whose is the script? In this case of life, whose script is it? If I am just playing a role, then the script has to be someone's script. So there has to be a script writer or a director according to whose direction or script I am moving in the requirements of my roles, and that is what everybody else is doing. So if I recognize that everyone is just following that, as Bhagavan indicated to Mother Alagamma, avaravar prapta pragaram aangaangirundu aattivippan. Actually that play is happening. It is not even that we are playing a role. We could say it's all a puppet theatre where the strings are held by somebody and it looks as if the dolls are dancing and doing prostrations or showing anger or whatever it is in their movements, but it's all just a puppet show. But if in sadhana one accepts it to be that way, then the unifocus would become easy. One would not be worried about events around us. One would not be blaming people or praising people, which is half or maybe even 80% of our energy goes in that. In daily life, most of our occupations are with other people and dealings with other people. So, this would completely vanish from our minds and our focus could remain on self-inquiry. Therefore, it is a support when, just as Bhagavan says, avaravar prapta prakaram, which is a very big support for self-inquiry because one is not worried any longer about the happenings around us. So, the events will happen and then the surrender will be higher, and when the surrender is there, one recognizes things move, and slowly this surrender may come into our inquiry in a stronger way, where we recognize, as Nandakumarji very beautifully again reminded us today, that he is not the sarada, he is not just the thread, he is the beads also. He is the one, if somebody is seeing the thread and beads, somebody is saying this is thread, this is bead, that is also he. Chittiramum parpanum serpadamum aroliyam attanayam tanamam. So that recognition, it will help us in our inquiry. When we see the thoughts arising, we may not worry about the thoughts also. We will see all that as role play, just some role which is happening, some play which is happening. And Bhagavan says, just look at it as a strange dream. That will start happening. It's just something which is happening. Some events are unfolding. Mentally also the same thing. It is not different from outside. When that comes, it will give us the strength to turn away from all these things back to the source. The first recognition in Vichara is the division between the thoughts and the thinker. And then to help focus on the thinker, in case the power of thoughts is strong, these can be used as supports. Of course, the question, who am I, is the biggest support. In itself, it is the support. But to strengthen that, because of various directions of attachments which we have, Bhagavan gives us all these other supports as only, as Nandakumarji rightly and sweetly keeps emphasizing, as supports for self-inquiry or as supports to get better clarity about self-inquiry itself. I wouldn't even say in the practice, but to get clarity about self-inquiry, to recognize why self-inquiry is the only important thing, because when all these things are mere role play or all these things are something from which one must be detached, then what is one supposed to do? What is one's role? Only self-inquiry, says Bhagavan. The rest is all directed by him. Then what are we supposed to do? What are we here for? We are here only for working within. Bhagavan says the work of the true seeker lies within, in self-inquiry. By his grace, he ensures that we tread the path and we experience the bounty of his grace. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramana.